If you've ever stood in the electronics aisle, staring at a shelf of glossy finished speakers and wondering whether any of them will actually sound good in your living room without breaking the bank, you're not alone. The fear of spending money on a set that sounds great on paper but falls flat in the real world is real, especially when you're balancing a small space, a modest budget, and the desire for a cinematic feel. I'd been there, scrolling through endless specs, watching video demos, and reading enough reviews to make my eyes cross. The question that kept coming back to me was simple: is this the speaker that will finally make my TV movies sound like a theater, without forcing me to rewire the whole house? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent the last week listening to the SVS Ultra Evolution Nano bookshelf speakers, not just in a controlled listening room but in the exact kind of apartment setup many of us have: a modestly sized living room, a modestly thick wall, a modestly loud TV. The goal was to see whether the Nano can truly deliver those stunningly detailed and refined claims while staying honest about its limitations. First off, the Nano size is the most striking thing about it. At just a foot tall, the speakers look like a high-end coffee table book rather than a piece of audio equipment. For anyone living in a studio or a tight-fit bedroom, that footprint is a blessing. You can tuck them on a bookshelf, on a stand, or even on a wall-mounted shelf without feeling like you're sacrificing floor space. The compact cabinet is built from a composite glass fiber material, which, according to SVS, gives it an excellent stiffness-to-mass ratio. In practical terms, that translates to a surprisingly punchy bass that you wouldn't expect from a speaker this size. When I cranked up the low end on a classic rock track, the bass was tight enough to feel, not just hear, without any wobbly boom that sometimes plagues tiny speakers. Now, let's talk about what happens when you listen to dialogue-heavy content, like a drama series or a news broadcast. The nanoscopic drivers are flush-mounted behind a chamfered front baffle, and the designers say that improves both on-axis and off-axis clarity. In my test, the spoken word was crisp, and the higher frequencies, the air in a vocal performance, came through with a freshness that made the room feel larger than it is. I was especially impressed hearing a piano piece where the high notes didn't feel harsh or glittery, they were instead articulate, as if the speaker could separate each hammer strike clearly. What about the bass? That's where the hyper-rigid diamond carbon coating on an aircraft-grade aluminum dome claim turns into something tangible. The dome driver produced a low-frequency response that, while not deep enough to replace a subwoofer in a home theater setup, was definitely more than the average bookshelf speaker. The bass was solid enough to feel in an action movie's explosions without muddying the mids. If you're someone who watches Netflix on a 55-inch TV in a room with moderate size, the Nano can handle the low-end demand without sounding rattly or distorted. It's a sweet spot for those who want the impact of a larger system but cannot accommodate a separate subwoofer. However, the strength in the highs and mids comes with a trade-off. Because the cabinet is so compact, the room acoustics start to play a bigger role. In a highly reflective space with little furniture, I noticed a slight boominess in the lowest bass notes after extended listening. The speakers do have acoustic insulation built in, and the FEA-optimized bracing helps tame that resonant feedback, but they still benefit from a little placement tweaking, either moving them away from bare walls or adding a small rug to dampen floor reflections. If you're buying a pair for a very dead-room environment, you might want to pair them with a modest subwoofer, especially if you plan on watching blockbusters that demand serious dynamics. Who should buy these? If you're an apartment dweller who enjoys movies, high-resolution music streaming, or gaming and you want a speaker that fits comfortably on a shelf without the visual bulk of a traditional floor-standing model, the Ultra Evolution Nano is a solid choice. It's also a nice fit for a home office setup where you need clear speech for video calls and a pleasant background for music while you work. The fact that you get a real SVS experience, the brand is known for its powerful subwoofers in a bookshelf form factor, is a rare find, and the price point is competitive with other high-end mini speakers. Who should skip it? If you're a true audiophile who expects a deep, cinema-level bass impact without a separate subwoofer, you might still feel a little shortchanged. Also, if you have a very large living space, say, an open-plan loft with high ceilings, the Nano's output may not be sufficient to fill that area without additional amplification or rear-fill speakers. Finally, if you're a budget-conscious buyer who is looking for a sub-$300 bookshelf pair, the Ultra Evolution Nano sits in a higher price bracket.